Welcome to Smashing Success Stories. I am your host, Karen. I'm a speaker, trainer, and consultant. This podcast is meant to inspire people who want results without compromising who they are. This is for folks that want to stay true to themselves while living in a world that challenges our humanity. So welcome, humans, champions, legends, to Smashing Success Stories. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we're doing this together. Let's get started. In this episode, we're going to discuss getting what you want. We will approach this from a couple angles, taking a look at basic needs, understanding impulse and desire, why getting to know yourself is a key component, being clear when considering what you want, and as always, you will get solutions and resources to set you up for success. All references and resources discussed in this episode will be in the episode's show notes. Any of the resources that I have created myself will also show up on smashingsuccessstories.com/resources. Also, if you go to the episode link on the website, in all of the episodes, you'll have resources and show notes too. I'm big on resources here. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. Understanding needs. As living creatures, our priority is survival. So the focus here is on basics like water, food, shelter. Does this sound familiar? Yep, we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very base of the hierarchy, we have the basics that we just discussed. And for extra seasoning, let's add in things like sleep and air as well, because, those are kind of important. In the next tier up, we have safety, which includes the ability to provide for ourselves. In several of the references that I've pulled up, some refer to this as employment. Now, I'm going to toss in my own hot take here and add things in like skills, which are more important than earning income or having a job. Side quest tangent here, but I feel that maybe if we separated money from skill, we maybe would have a better understanding of the system that oppresses us and a place where workers are exploited. So if we focus on skill instead of what the numbers look like, we would probably be in a better place as a society. I'll save some time here by not going too hard on this rant, but the concept remains. Skills provide value, and value gets us stuff. In the third tier up, we have love and belonging, family, friendship, and social connections. Now, Maslow's hierarchy was established in 1943, and it's been critiqued over the years, and I have my own feelings on it, and this is my podcast, so yeah, I'm going to talk about it. So, my critique. I feel that this third tier should be right above the base, right above basic needs. When we focus on our community and the folks that we care about, we look out for one another. And it's kind of wild to me that this model was created in the 40s. Literally, I guess as far as history and timelines are concerned, it could be considered after the Great Depression. But I mean, we were still on the struggle bus. It hasn't left the struggle bus station. And this is an era where Americans witnessed how income inequality was bad for everybody. So to place earning employment above connection after what the U.S. was recovering from and it was still kind of going through seems to me to be very tone deaf. Also, Maslow was an American. So it's not like he was out of tune with what was happening. He was literally in the middle of it. But the point here remains, and it's a strong one, belonging is important. And I do agree with Maslow that it is absolutely a necessary component of our basic survival. Belonging, community, having people in our lives is totally a need. People keep us grounded and keep our humanity intact. It's kind of important. On the hierarchy, the fourth tier up is self-esteem, confidence, and let's not conflate confidence with arrogance, because there is a big difference. Also in this tier are things like achievements, accomplishments, being respected, and having self-worth. Now, y'all, this is another one that I feel it's way more valuable than the employment stuff. Granted, being income secure certainly helps us feel better about ourselves. I totally get that. I've lived that life. I get it. Being broke sucks. But also, confident people with skills get jobs, right? So which is it? Is this a chicken and egg situation? I don't know, y'all. My insight is from lived experiences. And Maslow's structure has been scrutinized by folks over the years, but let's go. I'm going to take my pick at it too. I will say, though, that despite how these things are laid out in the structure, in the hierarchy, aside from the core essentials at the base, all of these things are important. All of it is incredibly important. I'm going to say that it's beyond just survival, and there are elements that are necessary to live a life well lived, like living in a community with folks versus always being at odds with one another. It also shows that when we focus on our own stuff instead of puffing up and hoarding wealth and resources, fulfillment, which is a natural human drive, keeps us away from things like consuming and consumption and for the sake of acquisition stake, which is hedonistic, selfish, and unnatural. I'm even going to take it a step further and call it juvenile and smooth brain behavior. We'll get into this. It's a snarky way of me saying that folks who hoard wealth are immature at best, and they're also dumbasses. So yeah, fuck those guys. Not literally. Don't give them a good boinking. But what we're talking about is human needs. Being secure in who we are because we know ourselves, not because of external factors. Again, we're going to get deeper into this, so stick with me. Next, at the very top of the pyramid, self-fulfillment. I love this one. It's my favorite. You know what I love about the world around us and the people in it? There are folks that have reached self-actualization and enlightenment that defy this hierarchy. They don't have jobs, no long-term employment. Some of them don't even have shelter, but they do have inner peace. They know who they are, and they don't need society, marketing, rich people, establishments, and such to define them. They're vibing. Look, it's an oversimplification of the immense work that goes into enlightenment, and I'm not here to cheapen it. But what I just said does take an incredibly complex notion and makes it a little easier for folks to grasp, and I'm not sorry about that. Enlightened folks won't get offended by it because they're enlightened, and petty BS doesn't bother them like it bothers the rest of us. So read Stuff by Thich Nhat Hanh. Also read Strength to Love by Dr. Martin Luther King. Or, a great book that takes a psychological approach to enlightenment is The Art of Happiness, which is a series of interviews between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and psychologist Dr. Howard Cutler. It takes really complex things and distills them in a way that makes it really easy for all of us to understand because it's conversations, it's spoken, and the Dalai Lama takes really complex ideas and communicates in a way that everybody can pick up on with willingness. Have the willingness, read it with an open mind. Another good book on this topic is The Book of Joy, which is a series of conversations between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You notice a pattern here? The three folks that I just mentioned, Dr. King, a holy monk, and an archbishop, aren't tech bro billionaires. These are the kind of folks that advocate for all of our well-being because they know who they are and want what's best for us. They understand the concept that when we all thrive, the world is a better place. That's the peak of the pyramid. That is self-fulfillment. When we're doing well, others in our orbit also benefit. Imagine a world filled with folks that are fulfilled themselves. What a dream! What a treat! Joy! But we get in our own way. And yeah, other people can mess it up for us too. But here's the catch. How we respond says more about us than it does about them. So how do things get so messed up? Impulse and desire. When we're born, we have needs that we require. When we're born, we have needs, and we require the help of others in order to have those needs met. When a baby is hungry, the baby cries. When the baby is cold, the baby cries. When the baby drops a log in a diaper, the baby cries, and also stinks. Might get other people to cry too. The point is, when we're babies, we make our problems an issue for everyone, because we don't know any better. We're unable to take care of ourselves and literally cry out for help. Then we become children. And we still have needs. But because we also have no impulse control, we confuse what we want with what we need. A toy becomes as important, if not more important, than eating our vegetables. Wanting to watch cartoons feels like a need, and homework may feel like torture. Look, if you were a school-loving kid who also got migraines on the first day of school because you were so excited to be there, this example might not apply to you. This very specific example. Congrats, you're special. Yeah, specificity. Guess where it came from? I was that kid that got migraines. I loved school. The point is this. As our brains develop, we already intuitively understand our needs because these are basic human things and the patterns are already established. But then we start learning. We start developing wants because now that we know what getting feels like, and thus the root of desire. Fun, playtime, snacks, attention, laughter, acceptance, snuggles, entertainment, a dance party, watching the same frickin' cartoon over and over again. Anybody who has kids, nieces, nephews, cousins, you get it. So on. The desire to have those things all the time is because as our brains develop, we lack the ability to control impulses. You ever noticed how honest kids are? They don't feel shame in asking questions until somebody shames them for their curiosity. They just do because they're learning. They're curious about things that they don't understand yet. And they also lack impulse control. What we as adults call intrusive thoughts are for kids, either those thoughts are spoken aloud or when the action just happens without warning. I get that kids can be brats sometimes, but they're children, and a lot of them legitimately cannot help it. Now, this isn't excusing bad parenting, but also give some grace to these kids out here, man. They're living in a world where their impulse control is challenged on an unprecedented level. Ads are being targeted to them without their consent. They're exposed to more information than any generation before them. And they are overwhelmed with stuff. Give them some grace, even if they might do something that annoys you. You're the adult, so control your own impulses. And great advice that I've heard recently, remember to duck. Because sometimes kids throw stuff. All right, as we get older, our desires become transmuted. We go through puberty, which for a lot of us becomes an awkward, stinky, gross, and horny time in our lives. We make decisions based on our horniness and our desire. It's honestly not a great time. I hated being a teenager. And though it's an important era for our personal growth, but between the social structure of high school and hormones and being in the closet for me, suppressing myself, not allowing myself to come out, it's a lot. And teens now, oh my gosh, they face horrors on a daily, if not hourly, or even on a minute-by-minute basis. Not only because of current events, but because they have access to information. And that information is coming from so many different directions. Plus speculation, internet and social media posts, how things are sensationalized, especially the negative stuff, all of it. They are being bombarded with information. So much of it is propaganda, and they're trying to evolve in a world that demands that they grow up while navigating through it in a weird phase in their lives between childhood and adulthood. In my opinion, teen years are the worst. If anyone ever says high school is the best time of your life, personally, I would challenge that person's sanity. And while there are some good times, getting through that and getting on your own is where things get really good. Being an adult certainly has its own challenges, but our wins are ours. But so are the consequences. Which is why when things settle in our brains and our identity becomes more structured, it's important to know who we are and what we want. Not want for desire's sakes, nor merely for survival, but what we want for our highest self. This is why self-fulfillment is so important. It's like the hierarchy provides us with a blueprint to help navigate through this, focusing on fulfillment, giving a damn about people and the world around us and building community, taking care of ourselves, feeling good about ourselves, and self-actualization. When our needs are met, we aren't driven by impulse like when we are in our formative years. We know who we are, we know what we need, and we know what we want because we have a solid foundation. Most importantly, we know ourselves. Knowing ourselves, aka self-actualization, is the key that unlocks all the good stuff. So how do we get there? How well do you really know yourself? Like, truly understand who you are. Not how the world defines you or what your role is. Like, beyond your assigned gender at birth, your economic status, your familial situation, the state of your relationships, how much stuff you own, what kind of car you drive, if you're fortunate enough to have one. Who are you? Do you know? Knowing who you are is going to be very important for the next step, because knowing who you are helps navigate through an additional existential question that, ideally, anyone would ask themselves. Why did I do that? We evolve by learning. Often, we learn by making mistakes. Sometimes, we learn from the mistakes of others. We pick up on good behaviors, bad stuff, all of it, and when we do, if we have any sense of accountability and self-awareness, we learn to do better, and we learn to own our actions. In last week's conversation, Karen Lee Koss dropped 2 bars for us. 1, own your real estate, and 2, who stole your bike? Because it wasn't me. Owning your real estate means owning your actions, keeping your own stuff tidy and not make it a mess all around you. The part about the bike is being aware that when we're upset about something, we have to be careful how we unleash that energy. We all have a tendency to take stuff out on others because accountability is hard. There's a reason why accountability is so big in the recovery community. So many of us had to mess up so monumentally badly that we had nowhere to go but up. And when you're knocked on your tail that far down and down bad to like subterranean places, we got to do the hard stuff to get up. We all make mistakes. Owning up to it and doing the next thing the right way paves the way for a better future. Personally, I don't believe in hell. Hell, in my mind, is something a lot of us already experience. Repeating behaviors, making the same choices, getting the same results. Same shit every time. It's hard to realize that we are responsible for so much that happens in our lives, what happens to us, and what we get. Karen also talked about how she apologized to her son for a disagreement they have, and I know that takes a lot. That's a big deal. And I know it was hard. Karen is one of the wisest and coolest folks that I know, and she apologized the next day. Not the night that it happened, but the day after. It needed to sit for a minute. She needed to have the realization. And then she actually did it, and the result was beautiful. Her son will remember that, and knowing him and their family, that is something that will continue to be part of their legacy. Connection, accountability, and excellence. Straight up, I wish I had experienced something like that as a kid. God damn, the amount of time and effort and money it would have saved me in therapy. But my experience did teach me what it feels like being on the receiving end and feeling injustice. It helped me understand who I am, and when I do stuff, to own up to it. It doesn't fix everything, but over time, things do get better. I'll repeat that again. Over time, things do get better. We get smarter, stronger, and more resilient as we keep these habits going. So why is this coming up when the discussion is about how do we get what we want? Knowing yourself helps you identify what you know you're capable of, what you're worthy of, to filter the things you want in your life and to reject the things you want to avoid. Understanding yourself helps you see that your desire stems from worthiness and not from an insecure place of compensating for something that your life is missing. Something that you are completely capable of filling with something more meaningful than stuff and things. Now, granted, capitalism is a hell of a drug. Marketing and advertising have gotten so damn good at understanding desire and psychology and customizing how we are marketed to on an individual level. I will think of something and within minutes, I'll see an ad on my phone. Capitalism is also a system of oppression that leverages patriarchy and white supremacy, which are all very good at telling us we're not enough and we need to work harder and have more stuff and compete with one another and feel like hot garbage. We are allowed to enjoy indulgences and simple pleasures. There is no shame in that. Treat yourself and treat it exactly like that. A treat, a reward, An awesome celebration of you for all the work you're putting in to understand yourself and how to move about this world. Finding joy and giving yourself permission to enjoy things without guilt. Because the right things will feel good. The not so good stuff, yeah, they feel icky. You ever gone back to an ex? Ever done the walk of shame? Not a great feeling. Same feeling goes when it comes to overindulgence. When I think of excessive desire and unhealthy ways of chasing pleasure, several things come to mind. Hedonism. In brief, hedonism makes pleasure seeking one's primary purpose in life. I've been with hedonists, I've been around them, and to each their own. If you're not hurting anybody, live your best life, but I have never found any of them to feel truly fulfilled. And they're always expecting stuff from other people. That fulfillment never comes from within. Hedonism is like trying to scratch an itch on something that is too far away, and you just keep reaching and keep scratching. And the primary issue, the itch, never goes away. In my mind, it's unsustainable and unhealthy. Another thing that comes to mind are things like privilege and being able to have anything somebody wants and how that can turn them into a bad egg, being spoiled and nasty. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that right now where the contrast is stark between the unimaginably rich and everyone else. And it's wild because they made their fortunes by stealing, cheating, and exploiting. They didn't earn it. They did not earn it. They stand on the very backs of the folks who earned it for them, and none of it trickles down. It is delusional to think otherwise. Please don't fall for that propaganda. A happier example is Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka and her song, I Want It Now. Remember? I don't want it later, Daddy, I want it now. That kid bullied the hell out of her weak-ass dad, and you know what? They both ended up in the trash chute. A fun fact, though, the actress who played Veruca Salt, her name is Julie Dawn Cole. She became a psychotherapist. Y'all, I swear, sometimes this stuff just writes itself. I love that the person who exhibited the quintessence of impulse and desire now studies that on a clinical level. Oh, it's magical. Additionally, the more that people have, the less connected they become to those who have less, and it sows seeds of resentment and callousness. There's an article in psychologytoday.com. It's in a blog, and again, link will be in the show notes, where there is a connection between billionaires and what in psychology is called the dark triad: Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. Anyone who has done any research on immense wealth and how it affects people psychologically knows that things happen in an adverse way, meaning that it affects them adversely. There is a direct correlation between hoarding immense wealth and how it impacts people on a psychological level, especially if they weren't at that place psychologically before they got the wealth. Now, granted, narcissistic, nasty people, that is going to be amplified the more wealth that they hoard. And notice how I'm very deliberate in my phrasing here. I'm saying hoarding. I'm not saying earning, because these people are not earning anything. They are hoarding. There is no reason why we in this world have things like, places that there aren't access to clean drinking water, and where there is famine and disease, and then somebody's flying off to space and flaunting their billions and billions of dollars. As of this recording, right now, on Earth, there are no trillionaires. And I say there are none because, past tense, the Earth had a moment, and that moment has passed. May that wealth continue to dwindle down. Also goes to show it's kind of like a Wizard of Oz thing going on, right? As if maybe somebody's wealth is somewhat based in things like perception. And maybe that perception, when the veil is lifted, we realize that, there's really not a lot there. Funny, right? Interesting. Look, if you want to be nice about it and take a moment to give rich folks some grace, there's an article from CNBC, which doesn't surprise me, CNBC. Also will be referenced with all the resources in the show notes. But anyway, the article discusses isolation and the problems that rich people face. Because, you guessed it, when you screw people over and take advantage of them and hoard versus building community and providing actual value, it's pretty lonely. Boo frickin' who. By the way, that last part of it was not CNBC, that was me. Again, this is my podcast. They can come at me. I'm also going to throw a fictional example in here because fiction does provide a way for us as, in general, to see complicated concepts more literally. Sometimes we need to have these things spoon-fed to us. There's a reason why art is very effective. And yeah, fiction, literature, TV shows, music, they're really effective at this. I love the show The Boys. And Homelander is an abhorrent character, but he's a really good character. In the last season of The Boys, there's a conversation between Homelander and Sister Sage. And Sage warns him that getting everything will not make him feel good. And he has almost this acknowledgement of that. It doesn't change anything. He becomes more unhinged the more stuff he gets. He becomes more evil as he exerts more control over people, controlling the government. He even declares himself a deity and demands to replace religion. Not to create a new one, just rebrand Christianity with himself as God. The situation is sick, and unfortunately, the writers themselves admitted that they couldn't outpace reality, which is really something because the script for the most recent season of The Boys, which was aired in 2026, the script was finished in 2024, and the last season aired in 2026. I love that show. I do not love how reality has sadly mirrored so many of the extremes that were written in that show. And in the most unoriginal way possible. It happened after or as the show was aired. Because unoriginal, boring white supremacists never have a frickin' original idea, I swear. I'm gonna link an article where the author talks about this. But do you notice any patterns? It's like, hey, we can have nice things, but we can also have time to chill for a bit and have a treat. But be mindful when it's not too much. And when we have too much, it takes a toll. It could actually, make us pretty sad. And sad is the best that could happen. It could also make people psychopaths? Yeah, hard pass. One sand for me, please. There is nobility in earning and providing, but some folks take it to an extreme. It goes beyond earning to provide. They do it for the sake of amassing, for the sake of having, and continuing to collect and to build and to just get more. There is a word for that. It's called hoarding disorder. Next, overindulgence and addiction. Like I mentioned before, having some indulgences are good. We run into issues when we overindulge. And look, this is something I want to learn a little bit more about, but there's got to be a connection between income inequality and how corporations and executives profit off manufacturing poor quality products, like food, appliances, vehicles, and how this leads to more health issues for the rest of us. Full disclosure, I bring this up after I'd done a bunch of research on this years ago. But this particular episode is getting long and I want to stay on target here. The point is that yes, we live in a system where quality has gone down, profits have gone up, and the majority of us are actively being harmed. However, while the system is terrible, we are responsible for ourselves. This is why I'm doing this podcast, y'all. To share empowerment and to remind folks of our sovereignty, to build resilience to withstand the forces attempting to hurt and control us. You deserve more, and you can have better things, but you've got to do the work on yourself and be strong and resist. Respect yourself enough to resist, And if self-worth isn't enough, get mad about the systems in place that are hurting you. Love is stronger than anger and fear, but it does take a lot of work, and we need to get a good warm-up to get there. The anger is quick, but it's not long-lasting. But if it helps get the ball rolling, hey, look, power to you. Just get to that place of worthiness. Please. We need you on this side. Another example is addiction, and this one's straightforward. Some folks can't have a little bit of something. Some folks can. But for anyone, sometimes becomes a lot. And then it becomes all the time. And then they got a problem. Some things are specifically engineered to cause dependency. Hell, I know several people that went to college for chemistry and they ended up in the tobacco industry. Why? To find that perfect balance of nicotine in cigarettes, to get smokers hooked and to get just enough nicotine in one cigarette to build the desire for more, but not to sate that desire, not to cure that craving. And thus, smokers are forced to smoke more. They got you hooked. It's a sick cycle. Yeah, baby, that's capitalism. And it's the same with opiates. Have you ever seen the film Pain Hustlers? It's got Chris Evans, Emily Blunt, Andy Garcia, and Catherine O'Hara. The film is about how fentanyl went from being a drug to help cancer patients cope with the extreme pain associated with cancer and cancer treatment to being a drug that was commonly used for pain. Pain. The dosages increased, and then usage increased because addiction skyrocketed. Profits also skyrocketed, and people were dying. The people inside this movement to push the hell out of fentanyl went to prison for this. And anyone who has heard of fentanyl very likely know how quickly it has spread in the medical community, how often it's being used for medicinal purposes. And yeah, there are ethical means of administering it under appropriate care, but it has also proliferated on the street. Here's a tip for you. Whenever you're having a procedure done or prescribed pain-killing medications, ask your doctor what the medication will be. You can ask for a non-narcotic, non-controlled substance. There are alternatives. If possible, avoid opiates by any means necessary. There's an incredible TED Talk by a gentleman named Travis Ryder, and he talks about his experience with prescription opiates and how it turned into a nightmare for him because of the withdrawals. It's a great talk. It's also a great example for mindset and determination. Travis wanted to get off the pills, and he went through hell. He went through withdrawal. It's torture, but he kept going. He got through withdrawal, and he got off the meds. And he shares pointers on how to avoid going through what he went through. It's a good example of advocating for ourselves. We should not have to advocate for ourselves and for our health, but we gotta. This is also where self-worth comes into play. Do you want good health care? Advocate. And it won't be perfect, but the more you do it, the better your chances will be to find better stuff. The system should be better. And until that happens, we must advocate for ourselves. And even when the system does get better, continue advocating for yourself. Not coming from a place of entitlement, but coming from a place of knowing who you are and knowing that you deserve great care. It's going to take a lot of us to make this change happen. So hear me out. Focus on yourself and do the work. That's how we get started. Final example in this overindulgent, excessive component is something called diminishing returns. An example that was brought up when I learned this in economics. Think about pizza. I love pizza. Pizza's one of my safe foods. It's one of my favorite foods. And look, even when pizza's not good, it's still pizza. It's still pretty good. It's a little bit of hot sauce or maybe blue cheese or ranch, and you can doctor that stuff up right quick. Sriracha is also really good. Look, the point here is that pizza's pretty great. So if you have a little bit of pizza, gosh, that's awesome. Have a little bit more? Yeah, it's still pizza. It still tastes good. But when it gets to the point where it's too much, the latter bits of pizza are not as satisfying as the earlier bits of pizza. That's diminishing returns. That overindulgent, this hurts to eat, I'm starting to feel sick slice of pizza comes from the same pie of pizza as that first slice did. But that first slice was way more satisfying, because that's what happens when we overindulge. Now let's get to the best part. Let's talk about solutions. Look, we covered a lot of this earlier, so let's dive into some of the resources I had referenced. Again, you can also find the resources I'm about to discuss on SmashingSuccessStories.com/resources. If you've already completed your personal inventory, awesome. Thank you. You're a step ahead. Just remember that the personal inventory is something to look at regularly and update often. Add in your accomplishments, stuff that you're proud of, and think of it as a brag book as well as a tool for accountability. For anybody that has not completed the personal inventory, definitely do that. Actually, let's go over it right now. If you're driving, please focus on the road, and when you get home, come back to this section, go to the show notes, pull up the personal inventory, and let's go ahead and work on it together. For anybody who's not driving, or, hey, welcome home if you're coming back to this section if you were driving, let's go ahead and open up the personal inventory and take a look at it. The whole point here is to break things down into 3 sections. We're going to look at our assets, exercise awareness, and then look ahead. So for assets, think of it as a brag book. What do I like about myself? And if this is hard to think about, ask people that you know what they like about you. Also, think about the things that you have accomplished. What are your top 3 accomplishments? What is something that when you look back on, you're proud of it? What do you like to do? And what are you good at? In the awareness section, here are some questions to ask when taking on a project or going for a goal. What is stopping me? What am I afraid of? Why am I doubting myself? What are my excuses? The greatest hits. The things that keep popping up in my head that telling me what I shouldn't be doing. And what is real and what is a lie? When looking ahead, think about what you want. What do you want for yourself? What do you want for life? What do you want out of your career? How do you want your relationships to look like? How do you want to feel? How do things look like in your financial portfolio? Then consider, what are some of the stuff that you want to work on? What are you in control of? What's out of your control? And in that section of control, are these things getting twisted? Meaning, are you trying to control too much? Or completely surrendering to life and not exerting any personal power whatsoever? Again, this comes back to understanding ourselves, knowing how we are responsible for the things in our lives, and like Karen says, owning our real estate. The next exercise is doing the worksheet I made for you called Exercise for Developing a Legendary Mindset. And for this episode, I really want to focus on the section toward the end where we're talking about manifesting. And as I reference in the guide, I understand that often it's hard to think about, well, what do I want? What do I want to bring into my life? So a lot of times, if that is a challenge, it's best to start thinking about, what don't I like? Because then we can come from a place of removing those things. And when those things are removed, it creates a clean slate. And then we can start welcoming in the thoughts, the feelings, and then we start getting ideas about how things can get better. I think of it like creating a Christmas list. And even for folks that didn't have much growing up, we still liked making a Christmas list because it was possible of anything. And why Santa provided more for others, well, we as adults know why. However, it was nice to think. It was nice to wish. It was nice to write this stuff down. And for a moment, in our head, imagine actually having these things. I also take it a step further. When I was coaching clients, we would go over this exercise and I would say, okay, start here. Now, take that idea and 10x it. And every time their eyes would get wide and it would be like, what? It's like I'm telling them that they need to walk to Mars. It felt impossible. But I was like, if you 10x it, you'll start thinking of things that almost feel like delusion. And I like this approach because when we start thinking about things that we want, we often hold ourselves back. we limit ourselves. So when we approach this 10x mindset, we're smashing those limits and opening our minds to something incredible. So let's go ahead and start with the first component of this manifestation exercise. We're going to make a list. Think about, what do you want for yourself? What does my ideal life look like? How do I want to feel? What does my relationship look like? What do I want in my career? What does my financial status look like? Does this sound familiar? It's almost as if understanding ourselves from the personal inventory feeds into opening the floodgates and welcoming blessings into our lives. So if this feels redundant, yeah, there's an intention behind it. And if you find that by doing this exercise, you get different answers the second time, that's something to think about. The first time it was written down, it might feel like a rough draft. And if we do it again, especially being primed with this idea of 10xing, now we're looking at what can actually be possible because we're relinquishing those limits. Yeah, there's an intentionality here. And again, if this is something that is challenging, think about what you want to get rid of. There's also something that I reference in the guide called a burning bowl. And you can do this on regular paper and be in a safe area where you have a pot or something that you can actually burn a piece of paper in. What you're going to do is you're going to write down lists of things that you want completely gone for your life and meditate on it. Again, make sure that you're in a safe place where you can have this fire. Make sure that you have access to water. I've done this in a fire pit, and I've done it in a small soup pot in my front yard. It doesn't have to be big. Just make sure that it's safe. Again, you can use regular paper. There's also something called flash paper that you can use. You can easily find it online. And the whole point of this is to get that stuff out. And as the fire burns and as the physical paper with all of those things are transmuted from that physical form into ash and probably going up because of the fire, imagine that stuff, that energy, being transmuted and repurposed into positive things. And just sit for a moment with a clean slate in your mind with those things being gone. And by sitting in silence, you'd be amazed how many ideas and thoughts will come into your mind. Be prepared to write those things down and work on the list of the things that you want in your life. This is a very empowering exercise. And it is something that I recommend doing as you see fit during different eras and stages of your life. But I really like doing it when I'm ready to take a leap. Before I started dating again, this is something that I did. I got rid of a lot of stuff that I was hanging on to, physical, actual stuff, as well as a lot of thoughts and feelings that I was hanging on to for some previous relationships, my own stuff, and I did the burning bowl. And I'm not going to tell y'all something that doesn't happen. I've said this in previous episodes. I'm not in sales, so I'm not going to blow smoke up your tail. I will say this, though. After I did this exercise, a lot of bad stuff exited my life. And then I met the woman that I am now married to. It's pretty wild. And what we're doing here is we are releasing the shackles. We're releasing the limits that either we've placed on us, experience has given to us, some of the stuff that we just need to shed to be more receptive to life's blessings. But again, recognize that we play a huge part in what comes into our life because of what we allow into our lives. I know that stuff is hard. I get it. I'm living in it too. I totally get it. But we cannot surrender. This is another reason why I'm so vehemently opposed to generative AI, because it steals the work of others and it limits creativity on the behalf of the people using the generative thing. Some call it a tool. I can't come up with a human name for what this thing does. When I say this thing, I mean this technology. It is so toxic to not only the world, but to sovereignty creativity, critical thinking, and not just how it harms the environment and artists, and which, yes, it does, and because it provides absolutely no financial value whatsoever, but also because people are surrendering their critical thinking. They're surrendering their individualism. They're surrendering their free will to this technology because they think it makes their lives easier. For what? So own your stuff. Work on yourself. And whether this is something that actually takes off, or if this can inspire a handful of people, we need original ideas. We need humans. Technology is a tool. You're going to hear me in an upcoming episode talk about where I actually favor AI, because AI in and of itself is a technology, and I embrace that technology. However, when it comes to the generative side of it, that's where I take a lot of issue, and it needs a lot more legislation. We'll get into that in the future. I promise you, I've got more content on that. And that content, it's not strictly related to AI. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up, so just stick with me. So the key here is when we start thinking about these exercises, think about what drives you, how you find your interests. And we learn these things by doing. We learn from good examples and we learn from bad examples. Something that also helps, you're going to hear me hit this note again, is by being in interest-based groups and connecting with people, right? It's almost as if there are some best practices for fulfillment. Wild, right? Next, we're going to talk about building resiliency to the incessant flood of information around us that demands our attention, energy, money, and is sucking our self-worth from our souls like an emotional vampire. Let's look this thing in the face to better understand it. It's called the id and the pleasure principle. Freud's theory of id, psychology, and the unconscious mind will be in an article that I'm going to link, but there's this part of it that really spoke to me. Freud suggested that the pleasure principle of the id operates through primary process thinking, where the primary process seeking to have its basic urges satisfied immediately without considering external reality or moral standards and values. In contrast, the ego, another component of personality, is influenced by the external world and utilizes secondary processes thinking. This secondary process works to balance the id's impulses with social and moral constraints. Freud said, naturally, the id knows no values, no good and evil, no morality. The economic, or if you prefer, the quantitative factor, which is so closely bound up with the pleasure, dominates all of its processes. Meaning that when we consistently chase what we want, we run into problems. Impulse control, kind of important. I also see this very often in tons of groups that I'm in. Sadly, it's happening a lot in women's professional and networking groups. It's also happening in a lot of the blue-collar groups that I'm in as well. Because we're all being oppressed by the same system that's telling us we're not enough and we need to overconsume. But the struggle is often rooted in learning how to rein in that desire, the insatiable id, and managing finances more mindfully. With these women's groups, the problems are not that they're not earning enough. They're earning just fine. The problem is that they're too busy trying to compete and put on appearances. Whereas one of the women's group that I'm in is comprised of several millionaires, and they live below their means. Wild concept, right? Some of them have cars that are over 15 years old. I am one of those people. My car just turned 15 in January. Running great because I keep it up. And also, really nice not having a car payment. But of the people I know, and this is in my orbit, this is my personal life. Of the people I know that are very well off financially, they're very mindful of their expenses. And when I say when I say really well off, I'm talking 7 figures. I don't know any billionaires. I make it a point not to surround myself with people who are leeches. But they're smart and mindful about their money. When you talk to them, when you see them, how they dress, what they drive, what they do, you'd have no idea that they're millionaires. Now again, We need to be honest about the unfair, unbalanced system that isn't paying the most of us fairly for labor, skills, and knowledge. One way we can combat and resist the system is by not buying into capitalist propaganda that encourages us to overconsume. You want to know my why I do this? This is part of my why. We're in a freaking mess right now, culturally and societally, because of overconsumption. And yeah, the system sets us up for that. But so many of us bought into it. You want to resist the system? Start with yourself. Speak out against the system and follow through with action. We are at a point where we just cannot get across to the folks harming us and to the folks that are licking the boots of the very folks that are stomping them down. So instead, we got to do better. How? Let's go over how to rein in those impulsive behaviors. The following steps are from Psychology Today, and the link to the article will be in the episode description show notes. It's called How to Stop, and stop is in quotes, How to Stop Impulsive Behavior. 1. Identify the triggering situation. Is there a type of situation that usually triggers your impulsive behaviors? Describe it in detail. Identify it. Call it by name. Think about what you're feeling, what you're thinking when that impulse shows up. Now, this could be triggering. It could be upsetting. So be ready for that. Be ready to soothe yourself, music, candle, whatever, taking a moment to be mindful, because it could set off things. And this might be, it's an exercise. It's going to be a work in progress. But just know that you're going into it fully understanding that uncomfortable things will happen. So be prepared for that. 2, identify how you're going to stop things in the future from being triggered. You want to pause, not react. How can you do that? Remember, you want to be in a safe space. You want to be very specific about what you're looking for. Some folks find it helpful to say stop out loud or yell it in your head. Hold your hand up with a stop gesture. I stutter. So as I'm speaking, I have my hand up that's providing me with cadence. So the hand thing, it's very helpful. This is the 3rd step. Identify how you'll take a step back. Gives you an opportunity to step away, to move away from that impulsive behavior and the trigger. So as an example, if binge eating is an issue, walk out of the kitchen. I take a different approach to it when I think, how am I not moving my body enough? Put the gym clothes on. I have yet to not make it to the gym once I've put my gym clothes on. It's almost as if these habits are effective, right? 4, identify how you'd observe. This step asks you to observe your situation before making a decision or acting mindfully. There's a gap between thought and action, an urge and impulse. It's a thought. It's a feeling. So when we can separate that thing, which thoughts sometimes are intrusive, impulsive, we don't have control over them, but we do have control over the action. This is where we create that stop, that step, that gap between thought and action. Step 5, identify how you'd proceed mindfully. Identify the coping skills that help regulate your nervous system or reduce painful emotions. Think about your needs. Again, worthiness, self-worth. That's going to play a huge part in nipping that impulse in the bud. I love step 6. Identify your ideal outcome for the situation. What would it look like for the situation to end exactly as you want it to? And how would you want to act and feel? Possibilities include coping without hurting yourself or someone else and increasing intimacy or connecting with someone. Here we go again. Connection. Pretty amazing. Step 7. Practice your coping plan in your head. Write it out and imagine yourself following it perfectly. Number 8. Prepare for crisis and reward yourself. If you identified anything in the above steps that you can prepare ahead of time, do that. Get your tools ready and make sure that you have something in place to soothe yourself, knowing that things could possibly be triggering. That's it. There are additional articles that are going to be included in the show notes, including how to cope with impulse control issues in kids and adults, and impulse control in adults. A quote from that final article: when that system is compromised, the brake doesn't engage reliably. Not because the person isn't trying, because the hardware isn't working the same way. This is the reason why we work on these things. It's an active work in progress. Okay, friend, if you made it this far, congrats and thank you. I read a book this year that had an appealing title, and I was like, yeah, dude, that speaks to me. It was a snarky title, and I was hoping to read about how people are just not doing their best and finding all kinds of excuses to be lazy and not think critically. And instead, I was frustrated to find that the book addresses different ways folks express themselves and how we can do better when interacting with them. I was pissed. I wanted to read about the problems that other people cause and make it about them. I read a lot of personal development books, but with this book, I just wanted to feel sanctimonious and validated in my bias. But you know what this book did for me instead? After the frustration passed, and okay, obviously there's still a little bit of resentment, but it passes. It happens in moments. It helped me be more patient when communicating with people, especially online. I'm great in person because, like I've mentioned in the progress episode, great things happen when we look folks in the eyes. I do a lot of in-person interaction. I love talking to people. Ask my wife. I've never met a stranger. But when I get online, me, the same person that I am when I'm out and about interacting with people in person, because it's online and there's a space between me and that other person, there's no physical proximity. Just like any other person, I feel empowered to say something snarky to somebody that I disagree with. And I don't often engage in rage bait. I certainly don't interact with bots. I block and bless and move on. And I don't get into arguments with folks online anymore. But sometimes in interest-based groups or educational groups, stuff will come up that should be addressed. Using some skills we've talked about in these episodes and some techniques I've shared in previous parts of this podcast, I was able to help a newer member get some perspective and actually listen to what folks were imparting. Some folks wanted to go hard against the newer member, but I led the conversation firmly without being condescending. It had to be a firm and direct conversation, but I had to make sure to address the appropriate points that the member brought up and bring larger context to the conversation. And guess what? It helped. However, at first, my immediate response was to get this person removed and out of our group, but if the person was willing to listen and learn, I wanted to provide the opportunity. And guess what? It felt good. We're not like besties or anything now, but it benefited that person, and it benefited our group. And it also empowered folks to speak with assertion and confidence without being cruel. Let's recap. Desire, getting what you want. We have needs. We are human and complicated beings, but at our core, we have needs that must be addressed. A huge component is for us to feel good and proud of ourselves for not only surviving, but to learn ways that we can thrive. We thrive when we feel good, and when we share ourselves with others, we build communities. Learning about impulses helps see them from an objective standpoint. Understanding the nature of desire helps navigate through all the noise that communicates lack of self-worth and the need to constantly seek pleasure and heed impulses. Fulfillment is an inside job, and while there are times when pleasure and treats are absolutely valid, the key is not getting wrapped up in overconsumption and excess. Get to know yourself. Give yourself credit for all the good stuff. Take responsibility for the areas that you know could use improvement. Knowing these things about yourself will help you understand what motivates your desire and to make good choices. Then, focus on what you want. Because when you understand yourself, you understand the deeper why that motivates desire. Wanting from a place of worthiness is empowering and counters the desire to fill voids to overcompensate. Fulfillment and reward just feel good. Aim for those. Before we wrap up, something that I learned this week. I learned that I actually know stuff. And what I mean by that is I understand I've got a lot of knowledge, but what I specifically learned this week is how effective I am at accessing my knowledge about things to bring more substance to an idea and a topic that I want to talk about. So how about you? What's something that you learned this week? Tag me on Instagram. The handle is SmashingSuccessStories. Or you can just use the hashtag Smashing Success. Find me on Threads, Smashing Success Pod. Tag me on there as well, or use the Smashing Success hashtag. I'd love to hear your insights from this week. We got an awesome Motivational Minute coming your way this next Monday, and a great conversation coming for you on Thursday. I'll talk to you then. Thanks for being here. New episodes go live every Monday and Thursday. Subscribe, share, and follow Smashing Success Stories on Threads, Instagram, and YouTube. Bonus content and exclusives are available to patrons. Check out patreon.com/SmashingSuccessStories for membership tiers and details. And always remember, whoever you are, wherever you are, just know that you are loved and that you are important. We are in this together. Till next time.